Thank you, Maggie. And as Maggie said, I'm a career educational bureaucrat, but I took a few things away from that. And I'd like to talk to you today about an issue that perplexes a lot of student loan borrowers after they've left school and are beginning to work their way toward making their monthly payments on their loans, or even if they've already begun making those payments. And that issue is student loan consolidation. And I'd like to go ahead and just jump right into that. What's the basic thing that a consolidation loan does? It uses a new loan that's made to you to repay and replace any of the student loans that you will soon be repaying or are already repaying. You no longer have any responsibility for any of those repaid loans, but you are responsible for the new consolidation loan. Now, there are two places you can go to find student loan consolidation loans. The largest lender of such loans in the country is the United States government. Through the Federal Department of Education and a program that it runs called the Federal Direct Loan Program, it makes loans that are called direct consolidation loans. And they're called that because the money the government uses to make those loans comes straight out of the federal treasury. The purpose of the federal consolidation loans has always been to help borrowers better manage their student loan debts. And that's usually what they do, but not always what they do. And we'll talk about some of the upsides and downsides of consolidating in a little bit. There are also a number of private lenders that consolidate student loans. They tend to raise the money they use to make consolidation loans by borrowing it through national and worldwide credit markets. And the private lenders are, frankly, the private lenders are in the consolidation business to, number one, make a profit, and number two, repay their creditors. So they market their consolidation loans heavily, especially on the internet. And this makes it relatively easy to find them by searching under terms such as private consolidation loans and private refinancing loans. By the way, that term refinancing loan is something of a marketing strategy, although really, whether it's a federal or a private consolidation, every consolidation loan has the effect of refinancing your student loan debt in certain ways. Now, if you're trying to decide whether or not you should consolidate your loans, some people can find that a fairly complex decision, because consolidation loans have a big impact on a wide variety of issues related to the repayment of your student loans. So if you're thinking about consolidation, I would recommend that you get answers to three questions. First of all, where are you now, and where do you believe you will be going in the future when it comes to your career, your financial situation, and your personal life? Second, would consolidating your debt make your career, financial, and personal circumstances better now or in the future? And if the answer to that second question is yes, then you need to ask yourself, who offers a consolidation loan that would best meet my needs? And now I want to look at what consolidation loans can do that is in your best interest, and also some of the things they do that might not necessarily be in your best interest. Although you have to weigh those against the strength of the factors that are in your best interest. And we'll look at these issues in terms of federal consolidation loans made through the FDLP, the Federal Direct Loan Program, but also in terms of private consolidation loans. So the first thing I want to talk about is transparency. I will tell you that direct consolidation loans, the federal loans, are much more transparent and therefore a little more easily understood than private consolidation loans. This is because the government has done a really good job of describing the terms and conditions that apply to federal direct loan program consolidations. And it's on an easily accessible web page, which you can see the how to get into that here. Of course, if you check out 5 or 6 private consolidation loans, you'll find that each of them offers different terms and conditions, but also the terms and conditions of any single private consolidation loans are usually embedded in the fine and sometimes overly legalized print of the promissory notes for those loans, the contracts that you sign for those loans. It's not necessarily that private lenders are trying to deceive you, but they're not the government, so they don't get to write laws and regulations. And they have to write the terms and conditions that apply to their loans into those loan contracts to which you and they will jointly agree. So one of the things you'll want to do if you're looking at private loans is there'll come a point where you'll be provided with that promissory note, and you're going to want to really carefully review that promissory note. Okay. The government doesn't ask for credit checks before it does a federal consolidation loan. Whether or not you get a credit check for a private consolidation loan and what the creditworthiness standards might be is all up to the lender. And you're going to see this several times as we go on. There are several things that I'm going to just say it's really a matter of lender discretion, because it is. And individual lenders may have totally different standards and requirements. Remember what I told you, a consolidation loan creates a single merged loan. In the federal program, the federal consolidation loans will replace all your federal student loans only with a new federal loan, with a new consolidation loan. Almost all private lenders will replace all your student loans with a single new loan. So if you have, say, private student loans or private and federal student loans, and you want to get those all into a single debt, you may have to go out and look on the private market. If all you have is federal loans, you can consolidate all those with the federal government. In the federal program, you can decide which of your federal student loans you may or may not want to consolidate. This is especially an issue for folks that still owe money on what are called federal Perkins loans. Bear with me for a little bit, because I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Private consolidations generally allow you to decide which of your student loans you will and won't consolidate. They may advocate that you consolidate all your loans, but again, there may be some reason why you might want to leave a loan out, or for some reason. So again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's talk about what happens with your repayment period under the two types of loan programs. In the federal loan program, consolidation program, if you owe more than $7,500 on all your student loans when you apply to consolidate, that's all your federal loans and all your private loans when you apply to consolidate, you can get a longer repayment period than you might otherwise have. In the private programs, the length of your repayment period is a matter of lender discretion, and so they may or may not give you a longer repayment program. You'll just have to, again, talk with the lender, read their promissory note, things like that. Here's how your federal consolidation loans through the direct loan program work in terms of lengthening your repayment periods. So if you owe, and forgive me, I made a mistake on this, I should have said at the very bottom, more than $7,500, then you would get a 10-year payout period. I'm sorry, less than $7,500, 10-year payout period. forgive me, I sometimes get confused with all these darn numbers. If you owe $7,500 to just under $10,000, you'll extend your repayment period by 2 years, or to a 12-year repayment period. $10,000 to almost $20,000, you get a 15-year repayment period. $20,000 to $39,999, you go to 20 years. 25 years after that. And if you owe more than $60,000 on all of your federal and other loans, you get a 30-year repayment period. Now, this is the major reason why borrowers use federal consolidation loans these days. Because to tell you quite honestly, the federal government tries to make sure that all federal direct loans, which are the majority of the loans made in the country, get serviced by the same loan servicer or the same contractor they hire to work with you on repaying your loans. So you've already got all your loans in one place, and that gives you the benefit of just writing one check and dealing with one loan servicer, at least on the federal side. But in order to get these longer payment periods, that's when you may want to look into consolidation. Now, there are two downsides to consolidation, because the upside is that the longer payment period lowers your monthly payments, and it can lower it considerably. But the two downsides to longer repayment periods are that your student loan debt could remain outstanding for a longer period of time. Let's say you're 36 years old, you could end up being on Social Security by the time you finish making 30 years of payments. And the total amount of your lifetime income that you'll have to pay to eliminate your student loan debt could end up being substantially more if you use that longer repayment period. Now, I say could because the number of monthly payments you're scheduled to repay with can be reduced if at any point during the life of the loan, your consolidation loan, you prepay. And prepay means to pay more than you're required to pay in that particular month. So, for example, let's say you got to a point in your career, you were earning enough money where you could afford to double your monthly loan payments. Then you could go ahead and do that, and it wouldn't take you the whole repayment period that you're entitled to get rid of that debt, and that's a big money saver. Let's talk a little bit about interest rates. First of all, one of the things that federal consolidation loans do is they look at all your loans you're about to consolidate. Now, this is not, again, all your loans, but all the loans you would consolidate, you selected for consolidation. And they create what's called a weighted average interest rate on those loans. I'm going to come to an example of this in a minute. Then, unless that weighted average interest rate is equally divisible by 1/8 of 1% or 0.125%, they round that rate up to the nearest 0.125%. Private consolidation loan interest rates are set by their lenders, so you really need to look into what your interest rate might be on those loans. And by the way, I want to add something here that's not reflected on the slide. And I owe a debt of gratitude to my colleague Linda Matthew, who runs a personal financial coaching practice called Money Mindful. When you consolidate, the government and most, if not all, private lenders will capitalize any outstanding interest you owe on the loans you're consolidating. Capitalize means to add that interest to your principal balance, and that means that you'll have a larger principal balance, and that on the consolidation loan, and so you'll be charged interest on that larger balance. This is something that's not necessarily unusual in when any lenders, federal or private, are absorbing loans that were made by other lenders. Now, let's use an example about the federal consolidation loan interest rate. For ease of this example, this is a borrower who will graduate this coming May, and they borrow the same amount every year, $5,000 a year, and they borrowed it at the interest rate that applied to that year's federal direct consolidation loans, which ranged from 3.76 to a high of 5.05% last year. So they've got $20,000, and the weighted average interest rate on that $20,000 would be 4.45%. 4.45% is not evenly divisible by 0.125%. So what the government does is round the interest rate up to 4.5%, which is evenly divisible by that. So you're going to experience a slight interest rate bump on most of the time when you consolidate. Now, it's not a big interest rate change, and I wouldn't advise you to turn your back on federal consolidation because of this slightly higher interest rate, especially since private consolidation lenders may set their interest rates even higher now or off in the future. And I want to talk about that for a minute. Okay. One of the advantages of federal direct consolidation loans is that your consolidation loan's interest rate is fixed for the life of the loan. So from the day the federal government, you get the money ships out from the federal government to pay off all your prior loans, to the day you pay that federal direct consolidation loan in full, you'll have the same interest rate over the course of that time. Now, private lenders may offer fixed interest rates, or they may offer variable interest rates. And again, that's up to the lender. The variable rates may rise or fall on an annual basis, or they may be programmed to rise at certain points in the future of your consolidation repayment period. Again, you'll need to research this with each private lender that you're thinking about consolidating with, and definitely when you get the promissory note, read through that, because you can actually find yourself with private lenders raising your variable interest rate quite a bit higher on a private consolidation. Then you have a number of borrower benefits that are associated, especially with your federal loans. And one of those borrower benefits has to do with the repayment plans that are available to you. So by merging all the federal loans you borrowed from other federal loan programs, like the federal Perkins loan program, or if you have, say, one of the nursing faculty loans that the government makes, or the nursing student or health education assistance loans that the government used to make, these loans become eligible for those loans that were not made to you through the federal direct loan program now are in the federal direct loan program with your federal direct consolidation, and they become eligible for the 4 income-based federal repayment plans, or income-driven plans, which are income-based repayment, income contingent repayment, pay-as-you-earn, and revised pay-as-you-earn. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on those, but I will tell you that all of those plans require the government to forgive anything you might still owe on your consolidation loan after 20 or 25 years of making payments. They also have the effect of, if you're an employee of a federal, state, or local government, or you work for a nonprofit doing public service, they also qualify you for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, where you can get your debt forgiven in 10 years of making on-time payments on your loan and doing everything you're supposed to do for that program. Let's talk a little bit about a little more about borrower benefits. In the federal program, there are 8 different reasons why you can postpone your monthly payments due to deferments that are articulated, outlined in federal law and regulation, or forbearances that are also outlined in federal law and regulation. And if you stay within the federal direct loan program, you retain the right to utilize these deferments and forbearances on your federal consolidation loan. But be careful here, because although you may not have to make any payments during deferment or forbearance periods, interest continues to accumulate on whatever portion of your consolidation loan was used to replace what are called unsubsidized federal loans or plus federal loans. So if you were a parent who borrowed Parent Plus loans to help send your child through school, or if you were a graduate student who borrowed those Parent Plus loans, or if you were a student who borrowed unsubsidized loans and you replace those debts with a federal consolidation loan now, interest will continue to accrue while you're in deferment and while you're in forbearance. There are federal subsidized loans that many of you may have received, including the federal Perkins loan, and interest is not charged on those during periods of deferment and forbearance. Now, for private consolidations, whether or not you may ever postpone your payments at all, and the reasons for which you may postpone your payments, that's totally up to the lender. But most private lenders are at least open to, excuse me, discussing postponement if your financial or personal circumstances make it absolutely necessary for you to temporarily suspend your payments. So again, that may be something you might want to look for in the promissory note, excuse me, and or explore with a private consolidation lender. Bear with me for just a second. It's allergy season in Austin, Texas, so I have to apologize for hacking and wheezing. Okay, I mentioned public service loan forgiveness. Again, remember, you keep your eligibility for that in a direct consolidation loan, but I don't know of any private lenders who offer any type of loan forgiveness for any reason. So in the direct consolidation loan, that public service loan forgiveness is a great opportunity, again, for government and nonprofit employees to get their debts forgiven tax-free after they meet 4 conditions over the course of 120 months. Those conditions include repaying a federal direct consolidation loan. So this public service loan forgiveness is not open to your other federal loans that you may have gotten through other federal loan programs. But they also include, you have to be a full-time public servant in each of those months. You have to begin repayment in one of those 4 income-driven plans and stay in those generally for the duration of your 120 months. And you have to make all your monthly payments on time and for the full amount. Now, it was only in 2017 when borrowers started to qualify for public service loan forgiveness, a program that was created in 2007. And so the government now has over 1 million applications for that public service loan forgiveness. You may have heard that there have been some serious problems with that, and there have. Hopefully those will get cleared up by the contractor that the government hired to administer that program. Again, more on borrower benefits. There are other reasons for which you may be able to cancel, discharge, or have your federal loans forgiven. And if you consolidate with the federal government, you retain those other loan cancellation, discharge, and forgiveness options, except on your Perkins loan forgiveness. And remember when I said earlier, there are times when you may not want to, for example, consolidate Perkins loans. The Perkins loan forgiveness will forgive your Perkins loans over a period of as short as 5 years. If you're a teacher or a librarian, you're in your medical personnel like nurses, technicians, speech pathologists, you're full-time in law enforcement, you're a public defender or a public prosecutor, or you're one of several other borrowers that are employed in several other public service fields. So you need to worry about this. You don't need to worry about this if you don't have any federal Perkins loan debts. But if you have Perkins loan debts, you may want to look up the Perkins Loan Forgiveness Program and see whether or not that's attractive enough to you to leave your Perkins loans out of a direct consolidation loan. And if you recall, I mentioned earlier that, again, private lenders don't tend to offer forgiveness or cancellation or discharge for darn near any reason. That's just something to take into consideration. Okay, finally, this is a note about your countdown to loan forgiveness. So I mentioned that after 20 years on income-based repayment, you can have whatever debt is left to you forgiven. Or after 10 years on through public service loan forgiveness, you can have whatever debt is left to you forgiven. Well, the clock restarts on the number of months and years it takes for you to get to that forgiveness point whenever you borrow a federal direct consolidation loan. So if you've already been making payments and working your way toward payment in the federal income-based repayment program, what you'll find is that, let's say you made a half dozen payments already, those half dozen payments aren't going to count toward the 10 years that you need, the 20 years you need for income-based repayment forgiveness, or the 120 months or 10 years you need for public service loan forgiveness. Now again, private lenders, not really much of an issue because they tend not to offer those sort of loans. So those are some things about both federal and private consolidation loans that you may want to take into consideration. Once you kind of clarify where you're at now and where you want to go. If you are, for example, working for a government agency, but you don't want to stay with that government agency, then and want to move into the private sector, public service loan forgiveness may not be an issue for you. But if you or if you aren't using the income-driven repayment plans like income-based repayment, then public service loan, or then restarting the clock really doesn't matter to you on if you do a federal consolidation loan. So again, I hope that's helpful. And forgive me for the phone ringing. I forgot to silence it. Okay, so what else can I tell you? How can I address any other questions or any comments you might have, any uncertainties you might have? Do we have any sort of questions in the box, Maggie?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Tom. I'll remind you, if you have a question, you can use the chat box or email info@savvyladies.org. And one of the questions that came in is asking if there's a prepayment penalty.
So on federal loans, federal student loans, including federal consolidation loans, but they're really on all federal student loans, there is no penalty for prepayment. The government does not want to discourage people from prepaying. Again, whether or not there's a prepayment penalty on a private consolidation loan, or even any private student loans you may have borrowed, that is something you have to look into the promissory note for and explore with the lenders you're considering for your private consolidations. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question is, how do I know if my private lender is providing a fixed or a variable interest rate?
Well, in my experience at looking at private lender websites where they market their private refinancing loans or private consolidation loans, they tend not to be very clear about that on their marketing materials. So the surest way to know is to look in the promissory note, which they will send you probably electronically, and you'll have a chance to review that before you electronically sign it and send it back to them. And you really need to read that promissory note very carefully. You could also contact the lender and pose a question to one of their customer service personnel about whether or not you would have a variable rate or a fixed rate on your consolidation loan. Now, I will recommend, and I'm not trying to bash private lenders. I actually recommend this anytime you contact anybody who is or would be administering any of your student loans. You want to make careful, detailed notes about any conversation you have with them. You want to record the day and the time you talk to them. You want to record the name that you're given by the person with whom you spoke. They'll probably only give first names. And you want to record exactly what you asked and exactly what they answered. So that if there's ever something that comes up later where you think you're being jacked around by even a federal student loan servicer, but certainly by a private student loan servicer or private student loan lender, you've got copious notes about, sort of the he said, she said of that conversation. I will tell you that some of the folks that are on the front line answering phones for loan servicers and private consolidation lenders are not put on the phones with tons and tons of training. And so they will sometimes make mistakes, even though they don't intend to. And so it's helpful for you to have those notes. And again, I would just keep notes on anything you do with anybody who's administering your loans. You could also send them an email. I have found that some of the private consolidation lenders are very slow or not very good about answering emails. Again, they may not have the staff to do it, so they're waiting for the phone calls to come in. But the surest thing to do is to look in your promissory note and see if it makes reference to a fixed interest rate only, or it makes reference to a variable interest rate. And if it does, it should describe when that rate may vary and what it would be based upon.
Okay, great. Thank you for that advice. The next question is asking if you could clarify when you qualify for loan forgiveness and when is income-based workable.
Yeah, so income-based repayment is one of 4 what are called income-driven repayment programs that the federal government offers. The government began to wake up a few years ago to the fact that many folks, when they're just out of school, can't necessarily afford to make the same payments that they'd be able to make later on in their careers. And so they thought, well, let's tie the borrower's monthly payments to their adjusted gross income. And those turned into 4 different income-driven repayment plans called income-based, income contingent, pay as you earn, or pay, P-A-Y-E, or the revised pay as you earn, or repay, R-E-P-A-Y-E, P-A-Y-E. There's nothing like Congress to really mess up what should otherwise be a very simple loan program. Anyway, you have those 4 options, and the one that would have you pay back, or I'm sorry, qualify you for loan forgiveness after 20 years in all cases, is the income-based repayment program. The other 3 income-driven repayment programs, it may take you anywhere from 25, as long as 25 years to get your what's left of your loan forgiven. If you're doing income-based repayment, remember that, again, the clock will restart when you get the consolidation loan. Now, if you're just out of school and haven't made a payment yet, then the clock just starts on income-based repayment. If you're in repayment and have been paying for a few years on income-based repayment, you're going to lose credit for those 2 years or 3 years when it comes to running the clock toward your loan forgiveness. And by the way, not everybody who gets into those income-driven repayment programs will necessarily qualify for loan forgiveness, because remember the loan amount you pay per month is tied to your adjusted gross income for the prior year. Well, as you go on in your career, if you're like most folks, your adjusted gross income is going to rise as you go on. And so it could be that you'll get to a point where your adjusted gross income will rise to the point where, under one of those income-driven plans, you're judged to be able to pay an amount that will get your loan repaid totally, nothing left, after, say, 20 years of income-based repayment or 25 years of income contingent or pay or repay repayment. So it's not a certainty that you'll get loan forgiveness under those programs, unlike the public service loan forgiveness program, where if you dot all the I's and cross all the T's for 120 months, and by the way, they don't have to be consecutive months, but 120 months, then you should qualify for public service loan forgiveness.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. I see it looks like, I think we have 2 more questions for you. This next one is, there are a lot of advertisements these days for private loan refinancing. In today's market, are you generally seeing that people are benefiting from this? Are they offering lower rates than original private loans?
I have worked with borrowers where the rates are lower than the original private loans. I've also worked with a couple borrowers where the initial rates on their consolidation loans were lower than their original private loans, but because they got variable rate consolidation loans, those rates were scheduled to go up in the future and would actually end up being higher than their original private student loans. And so, again, that's why I stress the importance of checking out whether you've got a fixed or a variable interest rate on any private consolidation or private refinancing loan that you might get.
All right, thank you. And this is the last question. which is asking if you can consolidate other loans, like a car loan, for example, with a private loan consolidation. So can you combine educational and other private loans?
You know, I think you're going to have to ask the lender about that, the private consolidating lender about that. I will tell you that I have never seen a private student loan consolidator that consolidated other types of debts, like say mortgages or car loans or home equity loans or things like that. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But I know that the terms and conditions of the financing agreements that those private consolidation lenders enter into with whoever lends them the money that they're going to lend on their private consolidation loans generally anticipate that all they'll be doing, or the lion's share of what they'll be consolidating, will be student loans. And so, and there are folks who watch student loans and do research on student loan borrowers know a lot about the behaviors of student loan borrowers. And so that's why it could be that their creditors have limited them to only doing private student loan consolidations, because that adds an air of predictability to, for example, how many borrowers might default at some point over the life of those private consolidation loans, how many of them might fall behind in their payments, things like that, all of which tends to detract from the profitability of the private student loan consolidations.
Okay. All right, well, those are the questions we have for you, Tom. I'll just jump to your last slide here. So I want to thank you, Tom, for a really great presentation, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today and asking a lot of questions. We hope you'll be joining us again. We will be sending out this contact information here for Tom if you don't have a chance to write it down. Thanks again, everyone, and thank you so much, Tom.
Well, thank you, and thanks to everybody who's on the webcast. I truly hope that I haven't put you to sleep. This stuff is really exciting. I mean, I've got to admit, to normal, it's just way too dense and way too crazy. Anyway, contact me if I can ever be of service to you.
Great. Thank you so much.